in general, right? So essentially instruction to routing. Today we're gonna go a little bit deeper into the first phase of routing, which is global route, and the next week we're gonna have a lab for global route, and then after that we're gonna look at the detailed route. So, so the agenda for today, again, I'm gonna go to what a little bit talk about what is global route and what we try to achieve with the global route. And then I figure it's a good to totally have an overview of all the flow that we have so far in terms of optimization, right? So what we try to do with each and every step that we have. So really we should do that like more often. And then what we should do prior to going to the routing step. I mean, obviously that we want to do that every, like the import step, we need to do, things that, important for import, and then same thing for placement, same thing for CTS. And so we have a few things that when you look at, just to make sure that the data is set up correctly for a successful routing stage. And then we look at what exactly say the underneath, what are the steps that global router try to do, right? And we look at some of it's not very important, but I think it's kind of like useful to know because talking about routing, right? We're kind of like curious how actually the computer actually connect the net, right? What kind of like how they actually think. So look at some of the few basic one, because we don't want to go too deep. That's purely math and computer science stuff. So but at least something for us to kind of like visualize how's the route get created, and once in a while we want to write something really simple, and understanding the algorithm is actually help create some single router sometime, and of course one of the main thing is we need to understand the congestion, right? So one thing that like either make or break the route ability is very much the congestion, right? So the hope is that all the work that we've done so far gonna help us, get a really clean route, right? And then if that's not the case, if we have a problem with the route ability, how do we go about debugging and figure out what's wrong? What can we do to make it better, right? So uh, and some other technique that I'm going to go over as well. So okay, somebody asking about, okay, so okay, so let's see. So what is global routing, right? I think we mentioned a little bit last time. It's kind of like divide and conquer, right? We look at the routing stage, and we say, well, let's split into two. And sometimes some or some rather older um, you know lecture, they say instead of two, they make it into like three, right? So between the global routing and a the detail routing, they call it like a track assignment, right? So, but essentially, I want to focus on the two main part is the global route and the detail route, right? So for global route, right, you look at the routing area or the layout. The two are gonna split them up, right? Just divide them, right, into what we said the global routing cell. So so you look at it, you look at the standard cell row. So usually the size that's the default size for the G cell, right? So it just create these tiny uh, square, right? So the nice thing about it is that you look at the standard cell, the same size as the standard cell height, and then when they design the standard cell, they already know how many track per standard cell, right, for that row. So I think so. Usually, that's you can actually change the G cell, but that's usually you don't want to do that, right? So make everything it just complicated. Just go with default and just how many track already in there. It's kind of like built in, right? So so after you divide all these the layout into these cell, and you look at the pin placement, right? So whatever pin placement fall within certain cell, you just like okay, you just count how many pin within that. You don't really care so much about where the pin relatively within that cell. It just belong to that cell, right? So because that's the unit we going with here, right? We not like it's gonna be a certain corner left, right, within that cell. As long as the pin with that cell, we just count the number of pin in that cell, right? That's what they call global, right? We try to simplify things here. So that's why there's no track assignment, right? We just used the routing resource and we count, right? But there's no track assignment, right? So, and of course, the next step is we have to come up with the global route itself, right? And the result of that is we're going to have the global route and the congestion map associated with that, right? So kind of like two things, right? So okay, so let's see. Just look at one of the example here. So as you can see here, just kind of like look at the step that we try to do here. So in this case, you think of it, we have four layers, right? Meta 1 to Meta 4. And we try to connect the pin 1 on, what's going on? Pin 1 on M1 with the pin 2 on M2 and the pin 3 on M4, right? So, and for this example, we just divide these square into like nine G cell, right? So, and and you see here, these are the on M1, the capacity or the resource per G cell is 4, right? So we have 4 horizontal track here. And then M2, we have 4, and M3 and M4, we have 2, right? So because of the width. So purely for this, example purpose. So we look at it and say, well, so what you have? So you look at it, you kind of like compress all the layer together, right? So you have 2 vertical track on M4, and you have 4 vertical track on M2. If you add that up, you have 6 vertical track, right? And the same thing, you have 2. Let me turn this on, probably easier. We have 2 horizontal on the M3 and 4 horizontal M on M1. So that's 6 as well. So that's the number we're looking at. So we have 6, vertical and 6 horizontal, right? So, and one thing is, so the computer gonna take that and very much convert into this wrap right here. So you have one of the vertex here is P1 on the lower layer, right? M1, and you have P2 here on M2, and you have P3 on M4, right? So when the computer is like, okay, so let's look at it, right? So if you look from the top straight down, we have 6 here, right? That's what they call capacity, or the routing resource that you have. You have 6, right? So vertically and horizontally, right? So, and then they're gonna do the calculation, come up with the route. And so these are one of the route that they can come up with, right? So you go down from M5, go down to M3, you know, go left and then go down. So, and this on the last one is, yeah. So that's multiple way of doing it, right? So if you look at here, the it doesn't give you which layer, right? So in this case, potentially it can go on M3, right? And then go down, right? So just one of the thing here is it's just one of the route that they can come up with, right? So that's a multiple, right? So that's where when you have multiple net, then they have to do the selection, right? So that's the point of the I'm trying to say here is the congestion map. Well, it's the order of the route, and the congestion is gonna determine the final route for any particular net, right? So I hope that kind of like help you kind of like visualize it a little bit more. Okay. So I think we talked about the importance of the PPA, right? So that's very much the ultimate goal of what we try to do, is that we come up with uh, a design at the end that have lowest power, highest performance, and the smallest area, right? And this kind of like an overview of the things that the PPA throughout the flow, right? So every step we try to focus on certain area unique for that step, right? So we right here, we at routing stage. So what we try to do is we try to minimize white line, right? So we try to get all the pin connected, routed with the minimum white line, right? So that's gonna help with the power. Uh, and then performance-wise, we need to meet timing, right? Uh, right. And then certainly we want to be able to route the design successfully, right? That means be able to achieve all the net routed cleanly. So that means within the given area, everything can be routed, right? We don't want to run to a scenario where say, wow, it's not routed. So more likely we have to increase the die size. That's not good, right? So that's okay. So what are the objective of this global route, right? So I think that the most important thing is this is the planning stage for routing, right? So we want to be able to quickly route the design and determine its routeability, right? So how likely is that we can route this design, right? So that's the key objective for this step, right? So if we can't route the design, then that's we very much have to stop and analyze and then see, if we have to go back and make improvement, right, for from previous step before we can go to detail route, right? So and if and the result of this step gonna be used for the next step, which is the detail route. Um, so on top of that objective, right? So we have to do the again the PPA, right? So we try to minimize the tool try to minimize the white line, reduce power, uh, reduce the delay on critical net. That's performance, right? And of course, reduce the congestion. Um, so we must increase our chance to route the design cleanly. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So, so usually, we done a lot of preparation, prior to routing, but it's time to kind of like go and double check things that, sometimes we route and we have really bad result, and we think that's fully because something we did wrong in, placement, CTS. But sometimes that's not the case. It's just the data that we feed in, it didn't prepare correctly, right? So the so the assumption is by this point, prior to get to routing, the placement is legal, right? So that's the key here. So we don't want this, right? We need the placement to be legalized, right? So all the cell has to be placed legally. There's no overlap, right? So because if we do have overlap and we run and we have congestion, right? And sometimes you have like millions of gates. It's very hard to see if it's uh, what's the reason for it, right? But sometimes it's just two cell overlap, and you just don't know. So sometimes it's good to do check place, right? It tell you right away, is it your placement is legal, right? So and sometimes you run and then you have a lot of issue with the macro, right? It could somehow it is unconnected. It has a lot of DSC because the abstract for the macro was not, create correctly, right? So if you look at here, we have uh, we have a macro A, let's say, then we have pin, right? So these pin is created with the blockers, kind of like around the pin. But sometimes you want to route to the macro pin with certain type of signal, right? With certain width. And with the given blockages, it couldn't get to that pin cleanly, right? So those are the things that you need to check, right? So whatever the spec that you want for the signal to connect to these macro pin has to match with the intent, right? So initially you said, well, it has to be a fat metal connecting to the pin. So uh, then the blockers need to be, created accordingly. And then sometime on the picture right here, uh, so remember that we create before uh, the placement step, we create the power grid, right? So the power grid come in first, and we put down this power line, right? From the correlate distribution, right? So and power network is from the top level, it's go down, and and then we go to placement, and the two gonna place cell, for sure. Some of them gonna be placed under the power line, the power, right? And when you run routing, sometimes you come out, you see a lot of DSC or congestion, and it's kind of like repeated in a kind of like repeating pattern, right? It's kind of like very uniform. And if you look closely, and some of those pins actually get blocked, right? So let's say your pin is on M2 or M1, and the power lines, these power lines on M3, right? So that's limit the acceptability to connect to the pin on the standard cell. So sometimes we have to come in and put the routing blockages underneath these, right? So to prevent the placement. So this is like sometimes you have to go back to the placement step, right? Put in these blockages way ahead of routing step, right? So that's kind of like from my experience. You know, if you don't do that, the tool gonna place cells underneath, and it just happened that more likely there's a pin gonna be underneath these power line, and you're gonna run into the routing issue later on. So those are the things that I say by experience you just know ahead of time, but these things you have to do, upfront to prevent to help the router later on. Okay. So this kind of like you saw like kind of like repeating same thing over again, but I think it's important to emphasize it's like so we talk about the G cell, right? So the tool now is instead of G cell, they create a called the routing region, right? So you look at some of the area of the layout of the chip, not going to be routed, right? So not the signal not going to go everywhere. And then sometimes you have the routing blockages. So routing region is applicable for the area that you expect the tool to route signal to, right? Um, so you look at the layout. This has the routing area, um, and then take all the given net is going to be assigned, right, to those uh, routing region, right? And then just like the previous slide we look at, the capacity or the routing resource get calculated, and then represent in some sort of, it's depend on the algorithm, but essentially it's have to mathematically represent it in some way, right, for the tool to use that to come up with the routing later on. So right, so the big one is define a routing region, and the second one is assign or mapping the net to those routing region, right? So so the quality of the net, right, or the routing is depend on the timing congestion, right? So in the order, how the order of in which the net are mapped, right, or routed. Okay, so we're gonna look at some of the way that the tool try to come up with the routing, right? So usually they break into let's say two big bucket, right? One is what I call a single net routing, right? So and another one is full chip. So the single net, as the name suggests, is a single net, connect pin. So usually this is a use for simple design, or sometimes you have a net that have so many pin, right? So more likely you want to route that net first, right? So it's very much that you have a special uh, algorithm just for this, right? And yeah, the second one is full chip routing, right? So it's look at all the net, not just a few, right? And then it's used a different type of the uh, routing algorithm. So yeah, it's, it's get as the chip get more complex, the algorithm get more complex as well. So as you can see, it's just, but I think this is kind of beyond the scope of this class, but it's just want to mention those, yeah, here. So we are aware of that. So, so let's look at some of the simple one I think is applicable to us, right? So I think one of the very very popular routing algorithm is the what I call a minimum spanning tree, right? And the second one is the Steiner, right? When you do, especially when you do a CTS, you hear about the Steiner, Steiner tree all the time, right? So the goal for this method is somehow you want to come up with a uh, minimum tree, right? So say, the issue is that you have these pin, you have multiple pin. How to come up with a net that has the minimum net length, right? The Y length is minimal, right? So that's a problem we this algorithm try to solve here, right? And it's supposed to be really simple. Um, as you can see here, just look at quickly from the left to the right, right? So if you add up the wire length, so from A to B is the same, right? But then from B to C, totally you have like what? You have like 6 units, right? So on the right here, instead of go directly B to C, let's go to this point. That's a name for it, right? So it's tap to the trunk instead of go directly from pin to pin, right? So if you look at the Y line from the left and the right, so the right has a smaller Y line, right? And that's what we want, right? So for majority of the case, when the net weight is all the same, right? So all of these net treated equally, timing Y or um, congestion Y, then the solution on the right or the standard tree is what we prefer, right? So these are the advantages of this algorithm. It's pretty simple, right? Very straightforward. It's can be routed very quickly. So and it's scalable, right? So when your design getting larger, this thing doesn't scale, you know, it's scaled linearly, right? So that's the key here is that you try to come up with something that's scaled linearly, right? Not like exponentially, right? That's very, very bad. Yeah, here is just a illustration on how you can go from the minimum spending tree to a Steiner minimum tree, right? So one is, remember, is that, yeah, one is you start out with the tree and then you try to optimize it, come up with the minimum Y length. So I think what they try and do here is I think I have an example later on. Uh, I do have, okay, here. So it's similar to what we have here. But this is like six stage. So instead of like 1, 2, 3, we have how many pin here? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So as you can see here, what it does is the first thing it does is it's draw to connect from 1 to 2. Essentially, there's two ways you can do it, right? Either you can go right and go down, or you go down and go right, right? So the first step is that's two options, right? To connect the pin 1 to pin 2, right? And then say, okay, let's stop there. Let's connect pin 2 to pin 3, right? So what it does is it's create this box, right? The bounding box, similar to the first one. Create a bounding box here. And then say, oh, which one actually share between 1, 2, and 3. So after you draw this bounding box here and say, oh yeah, I want to do this right first and go down, right? Because you're sharing it, right? So, and then you can do the same thing here. So the idea is that you share the edge that connecting to the next box. So that's why the Steiner tree is so popular because it can run extremely fast, right? And with a really, really good result, right? So okay, one of the another method is called maze routing, right? So this one is simple as well. So you have a source pin S, right? It's starting here, and you try to connect to the target pin T, right? So, and then you have these boxes just, represent, either blockages or macros that you can't route to, right? So this maze routing is actually is what they call, sometimes they call it is like the wave, right? So you start from your source and you just marching out, right? You waving out. And until you propagate the wave until you get to the destination, right? And then you backtrack, right? So that's what it does here. So, say, okay, you look at the S, the source, and say, wow, my first wave gonna be the box right next to the source, right? So in this case, you look at there's 4 boxes around the source, right? So indicated the first step. So by writing all these one here. So that's the first step. So the second step is every single square of the first step, because color become the source, and then you do the wave again, right? So I say from this one here, you do, oh, I say, okay, I can go here, 2, up here, 2 and 3. So you repeat the same thing for all the number 1 boxes. So you get all the number 2 box. And then you do the same again here, right? So up to here we have like 1, 2, 3. So the wave has been expanded like 3 times, right? So let's see here. And then we keep going, right? So if you look at it, let's see. I'll try to annotate something here. So if you can see, right? So if you look closely, it's gonna be like that. So we have, well, so yeah, it's gonna be, how do I get this? Yeah, it's kind of way keep going, right? So that's that 2. And now I try to show some of the example here. So this is the 6. So it keep expanding, right? So, and because of that blockage, we can't go through here, but so that's 6. And of course, the T right there. So we need 7, and then 8 is supposed to be the 1, right? So just propagating. So in here, yeah, that's our answer, right? So when we get to the target, we just backtrack, right? So that's one way. You can backtrack like that, or you can backtrack like here, right? So there's so many ways uh, you can do, right? So, uh, yep. So, so these pretty simple, right? Think about it, the computer can do it very, very quickly and efficiently. So because this is so simple. Um, okay, let's see what else I have. Okay, so that's more, but essentially I just want to touch on like two symbol algorithm that should be aware. Let's see. Okay, let me clear the.
Do you want me to clear for you?
Yeah, I think I feel. Okay. Yeah, I'm just learning how to do that. So the so we currently mentioned the single net routing, right? And this is full chip routing. So realistically, this is the modern uh, routing does, right? Because you can't just look at just a few, right? You want to look at the whole uh, design, and you want to run it, right? So the thing with the look at all of the net at the same time is the computing resource, right? So everything has to be considered. That means it has to be in the memory, right? So uh, so they talking about this very popular what they call IL ILP, right? Which I think, as again, it's just beyond the scope of this class, but essentially that's the algorithm it's used to route over the net at the same time, right? So here you can say, well, this the two you can do it sequentially, or you can do it simultaneously. So and in reality, sometimes we have certain net that we know is they are critical. So you can actually go and prioritize, right? Give those net a list of net that you want to route first. Kind of similar to a clock net, right? So but talking about the CTS, so we only route the clock net first because they kind of special, right? They most signal net has a very limited number of pin connect to a net. But the clock net is very different, right? Clock net, a single net connect to thousand, very much connect to all the tree, right? All the flops. So that's why we want to route it first. But sometimes we know that some critical net, we need to give the tool the best chance to route that net perfectly. Then we can put, a list of net that we consider to be critical, and we ask the tool to route them first, right? So we do have a choice, um, and then let the tool do the rest, right? So and another way of doing it is, let so it's always about the runtime, right? You want to come up with the best solution by calculating all possibility, right? Or you want to start with something quick, and then if you see it, if you see a problem, then you fix it locally, right? So that's what they're talking about here is the rip up and reroute, right? Let's try to route with the symbol router first, right? And then if we go in, we see some congestion, right? And then we just locally, we can just rip them out, right? So the limitation of this is sometimes you have a net that go over a macro, right? Or go to a channel. Then rip and reroute usually not gonna fix it because rip and reroute only look at locally, and it can't see beyond the other side. So it's never it keep trying over and over again, and it's more likely it's not gonna fix it, right? So that's why we need to understand how certain the way the router works, right? So sometimes we have to go back and say, well, we have to reroute the global route for a certain net, right? So you get a different route, right? So, but again, it's everything is a trade-off, right? You want the router to run quickly, right? And then come up with the result, right? You want to sit there and keep thinking forever and then come up with the best result, right? So this slide essentially talk about essentially the thinking behind the router, right? So it's like, well, come in, do it, just route, right? And let's see, is it good, right? If it's good, then we done, right? If it's not, right, we have a lot of violation, then yeah, try to fix it locally, right? So, and of course, the different here is different tool, different setting gonna come in here, right? It's not all the initial routing is going to be the same, right? We look at so many different uh, algorithm how to route certain net, right? And then the setting that you can set, you want to do timing driven routing, you want to do the crosstalk aware routing. So many things that come, you know, as an input to the router. So the router has to consider all of that, right? Okay, so let's see. Okay, so what do we get when we run through the global route? So usually we look at the congestion, right? So that's how we determine whether what's the chance that we gonna be able to route this design, right? So every tool has a different report, but usually it's breakdown into layer, right? So you look at the column here, first column here. So for this report, we see 6 layer, right? So, and every single layer, we break it down in terms of how bad is the congestion, right? So here, so what they call overcon here is a over congested, right? So they're gonna go in and they're gonna count how many global cell are over, right? So this column is just 1 or 2. So of course you expect these gonna be a big number, right? Here. And then you don't want so these gonna higher number. That mean that's you need like how many additional track, So certainly you want all these to be 0, right? So in this case, just by looking at this, the M2 seem to be worse, right? So we have really bad congestion on M2 here, right? So it's not just on 1 or 2 additional track. Let's go even up to 7 or 12, right? That means something. I mean, this number is not too big. It's about 100, so it could be some local area that we need to look at. But if you look at all of these layer, the layer M2 kind of like stand out, right? It's very bad compared to the other layers. So right. So M2 and M4. So by looking at, so there's many things you can, try to read from this report, right? So let's say M2 and M4, usually they lead the same direction, right? So by looking at here, you say, well, more likely, yeah, either vertical or horizontal. You have trouble with that, right? So 1 and 3 and 5, not too bad, right? But 2 and 4 look are the worst, right? So and 2 and 4 are the same direction, right? So so it could be that your chip, the aspect ratio may be not ideal, right? So maybe your vertical channel is a little bit, you need more, or horizontal, either way, right? So just by looking at this, it gives you a lot of idea, right? So that's, and then you may come up, you may thinking, just can I just tell by looking at this number and determine whether I can be, the chip can be routed, right? So it's pretty hard. So it's depend on very much you have to analyze it, right? So certainly if you have like 5%, then probably it's not going to be routable, right? So it's around 1%, yeah, maybe not, right? So but this is 2, yeah. So let's see the overall. Yeah, one, a little bit more than 1. So I think it's right at the borders. So certainly we want to keep it below 1, right? So for majority of the time. So this one way to look at it is by looking at this number, right? So it tell you per layer and how bad it is, right? So by looking at this, M2 is the worst, and followed by M4, right? And that is sometimes it kind of makes sense, right? So usually the vertical channel is they try to use M2 and M2 run out, right? So they're gonna try to use M4, right? So usually those the same direction get worse at the same time because they have to jump up, right? So let's try to use M2. M2's out. So they try to use M4, right? So another chip you may see M3 and M5, right? Because they try to use M3 and they use out. So they have to jump up to M5 to try to use the same thing. So usually M1 is kind of like not used realistically. It's not really for routing, the long wire, right? Because just standard cell use up most of the M1 already. So okay, so I will try to do one more, and I think we're gonna take a break after this. Okay, so we look at that table, but it's all way better to look at, visually, where are the congestion, right? Because that table only give you the number, right? It doesn't tell you where it is. right? It doesn't give you that, you know, the is that global? Is that happen at certain corner, right? Is that next to a memory? So you want to look at, you know, the, the congestion map, right? So see where things are, right? So you certainly don't want to see red, right? Red is just bad, right? You want to see mostly blue, a few green, a few, you know, black, right? The color can be different. So, but essentially, red and yellow or orange is just bad, right? So you have to analyze, you have to look at both, right? So look at the congestion table, and then you look at this, right? And then try to combine them together, right? See, oh, if the number you look in previous table is really bad, but you go here, you look, it just happened, let's say just tiny, everywhere is mostly blue, but like just a few localized area here, and it's maybe not too bad, right? So those are the things that you need to analyze and see, is that the congestion is local? Is that over the standard cell area, right? Um, is that something to do with the macro placement, right? Yeah, maybe the macro placement is not optimal. The channel is probably not optimal. Uh, those sort of things, you have to figure that out, right? So, okay, so I think it's time to take a break.
So Tian, when we get back, can we do two things? One is I'm going to go over the final assessment, um, just in case
Okay.
people didn't read them yet. So to open up for questions. And then if you can think of a way to explain all the priorities, right? Because all these track assignment, global routing, it will give priorities to certain signals, to certain optimization, timing first. So think of how the tool. I actually don't pay attention to all these things, but if you have insight on how the tools, give priorities for different signals, that would be good to mention. Right?
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So we're gonna be back in 5 minutes. So
I
Dave, you're
guess,
gonna
Dave.
create the counter. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I had my microphone disconnected, but yes, counter's going. 5 minutes.
All right. All right. Thank you.
All right, everyone, welcome back from the break.
Okay, so Phil, you want to start with what you have?
I can do that. All right, let me share the screen. Screen number 3. Ok, mọi người thấy cái screen không ạ? Ok, có câu hỏi Nguyễn Văn Duyên. I can see in the syllabus 26/4 we have final project announcement. Should we start working on project by that time or wait until 14/5? Ok, câu hỏi thì sẽ được trả lời. Cảm ơn Nguyễn Văn Duyên đã hỏi. Nhưng chỉ có một câu hỏi thôi. Thì mọi người thấy cái share screen chưa hả? Thấy cái project chưa ha? Hay là chưa thấy? Phải làm lại thì phải. New share thấy không ta? Có thấy cái syllabus không ạ?
Yes. Có thấy.
Có, ok. Thì bây giờ là chúng ta đang ở tuần này, tuần thứ 18. Thì ngày 26 là tới cuối tuần sau, thứ 6 tuần sau là mình sẽ có cái chi tiết về cái dự án cuối cùng. Thì cái đó là trong thời điểm này là mọi người sẽ biết dự án nó sẽ về cái gì và cần làm những cái gì. Thì để trả lời câu hỏi của Nguyễn Văn Duyên là các học viên bắt đầu làm trên cái dự án bắt đầu lúc đó được rồi, nhưng mà sẽ không có làm hết cho đến khi mà mình học xong tới cái hết phần routing thì và phần export nữa, tức là còn mấy tuần nữa đúng không, sau đó sẽ học mấy tuần về export và routing. Nhưng mà rồi cái tuần mà ngày 15 tháng 4 và 17 á, cái tuần đó là mình sẽ có gọi là office hours, tức là lúc đó là từ đây để trở đi thì ai có muốn hỏi gì thì cứ hỏi, nhưng mà mình không có office hour thì cứ hỏi theo các người phụ giảng trong cái nhóm của mình. Còn mà nếu những câu hỏi nào hóc búa mà hoặc là muốn chia sẻ với lớp á, thì nhờ các phụ giảng, nhờ các giáo sư phụ giảng thì đem vào trong lớp học để cho mọi người có thể chia sẻ và trả lời được đầy đủ hơn nếu cần. Thì mục đích bây giờ là từ đây đến đi á, thì nói chung cái dự án cuối cùng là sẽ học sinh sẽ được đưa ra một con chip. Thì con chip đó thì học sinh sẽ đi nguyên quá trình từ import đến floor planning đến placement, clock tree synthesis and routing. Thì sẽ có những cái đòi hỏi. Thì mỗi học viên là tự làm riêng, có thể là bàn tính với nhau, học hỏi với nhau trong nhóm. Nhưng mà khi mà nộp á, để mà đơn giản hóa việc mà chấm điểm á, thì mỗi học viên đều có một cái bài nộp riêng. Còn mà nếu mà nộp chung thì rất là khó chấm điểm từng cá nhân, và chấm điểm tập thể mà chia ra từng cá nhân thì rất là khó. Thì như vậy là tới đây là học viên sẽ có những cái chi tiết mà bắt đầu là thực hiện cái dự án của mình liền tại chỗ. Và trong cái tuần ngày 14 và 15 là sẽ có mình không có giảng nữa, nhưng mà những cái ngày đó học viên cũng vẫn vô lớp, thì có thể là mình chia ra nhiều nhóm để mà học viên cần câu hỏi gì cụ thể trước cái ngày cuối cùng là ngày hồi này thiếu cái chỗ là project due. Xin lỗi, project due là ngày 19. Thì ok, tức là ngày 12 giờ khuya ngày 19 giờ Việt Nam là project due, sau đó là không có cập nhật hóa được nữa. Thì những cái câu trả lời đều là nằm trên mạng dùng theo cái Google Quiz mà mọi người đã từng đã và đang dùng. Thì cái đó giúp chúng tôi chấm điểm một cách tự động nhiều. thì từ đây đến lúc ngày 19 là từ ngày 26 đến ngày 19 là học viên có thể làm bất kỳ lúc nào, và muốn hỏi gì thì cứ hỏi. Nhưng mà đối với một số học viên thì có thể là biết hết rồi, nhưng mà một số học viên nếu mà không có theo kịp và không có cơ hội hỏi về những cái mục mà trước đây á, thì bây giờ là time to catch up, để mà bây giờ là bắt đầu là mình chạy đua, mình ráng mình hỏi cho nó đầy đủ để mà có thể làm được cái dự án cuối cùng. Thì và sau khi cái tuần đó rồi là mình sẽ có trong cái office hours này, nếu mà không có nhiều câu hỏi thì mình cũng có thể review, mình có thể ôn lại những cái bài học đã làm. Nhưng mà ngày 21 là cái ngày mình đặt ra thêm một cái nữa, gọi là cái review cuối cùng, để mà tất cả mọi người đều nắm vững những cái key takeaways để mà bắt đầu học làm cái bài thi lý thuyết. Bài lý thuyết là được làm ở tuần ngày 24 tháng 5 này. Thì ngày 24 tháng 5 này là học viên cần phải vào lớp học, cần phải vào 3 cái địa điểm, và cuộc thi này sẽ là cuộc thi gọi là trực tiếp, và không có thể nào làm trên mạng được. Thì sẽ có giờ, sẽ có người coi thi. Và cái tuần cuối cùng thì thứ ba là mình sẽ ôn lại những cái gì mà những câu trả lời của các dự án, hoặc là những câu trả lời của những cái bài thi, để cho học viên nắm vững thêm một lần nữa trước khi tốt nghiệp. Thì cái tuần lễ cuối cùng là mình sẽ có gọi là ăn mừng lễ cuối khóa và trao chứng chỉ, về cũng có thể là trao cái quà gì đó cho những người học sinh xuất sắc, thì chúng tôi chưa biết được. Chỉ có vậy thôi, không biết mọi người có hỏi gì không về cái nội dung của thi, hoặc là những cái câu hỏi gì liên quan đến cái việc đánh giá cuối cùng không? Mọi người hiện tại có thấy có những khó khăn gì không, hay là tất cả đều là straightforward hết? Sao ạ?
Dạ là mình làm cái project rồi mình nộp project xong rồi mình có thuyết trình về cái project đó không?
Không, lần đầu thì dự định là như làm project với lại từng nhóm thì sẽ có thuyết trình, nhưng mà vì làm từng cá nhân, thành thử mình có rất nhiều học viên, thành thử không có thể thuyết trình được. Cũng có thể là lựa một số để thuyết trình, nhưng mà nghĩ là cái thời giờ được sử dụng một cách hữu hiệu hơn nếu mà mình có thể là ôn lại, hoặc là thảo luận về những cái đề tài gọi là những cái gì mà quan trọng trong những cái kỳ thi này, thì cái đó là cái lần cuối cùng này nè, tức là tuần cuối cùng này mình có thể là mình ôn lại những cái gì quan trọng trong những cái câu hỏi và trong những cái chi tiết về làm dự án. Còn Trần Hiển Đức hỏi where the netlist and library come from the final project. Thì lần đầu là chúng tôi dự định là làm một cái RISC-V, một con chip dựa trên cái RISC-V và SkyWater 130. Nhưng mà trong quá trình làm thì cái cách người ta release nó không có được, gọi là không được là dễ dàng cho cái việc mà mình cài đặt trên cloud. Do đó thì chúng tôi sẽ làm sẽ làm một cái test case mà đến từ trong cái nội dung của Cadence. Thì trong tương lai những khóa học sau và những cái gọi là engagement kế tiếp thì hy vọng những học viên sau khi lớp học này cũng có thể là cùng cũng có thể tham gia được ở những cái hoạt động trong tương lai. Thì lâu dài là chúng tôi muốn là open source, chúng tôi muốn dùng những cái open design giống như RISC-V và những cái open PDK giống như là Skywater, và sẽ tham gia xin ngân quỹ để mà mình làm những con chip khi mà cái nhóm học viên tiếp tục tham gia với nhau thì cũng có thể có cơ hội định nghĩa một con chip và làm và để đưa ra sản xuất ở Skywater với một cái MPW. Thì đó những cái hướng lâu dài. Còn bây giờ thì tại cái lớp pilot này, lớp thí điểm này thì tổ chức cũng rất là gấp rút, thành thử không có đủ thời giờ để mà có những cái tài liệu như ý muốn được. Ok, nếu không có câu hỏi gì thì Thiện you can have the class back. Cảm ơn mọi người. Nếu mà có câu hỏi gì thì cứ bỏ trên cái stream ở trên Classroom thì có gì chúng tôi sẽ trả lời.
Vậy anh Phiếu là mấy em là có mấy tuần để làm?
Để coi lại cũng khá nhiều. Để coi share lại
More
nha.
than 3 weeks.
Yeah. Tức là ngày 24 tháng 6 rồi, như 26 tháng 4 là bắt đầu là biết. Thì mình có 1 tuần, cái này là 1 tuần, 2 tuần, 3 tuần. 3 tuần.
3 tuần với 2 ngày.
Dạ, 3 tuần 2 ngày. Thì nhưng mà tại vì mới vẫn còn mấy cái lab cuối cùng, nhưng mà khi mà cái tuần cuối cùng là các em có 24 tiếng đồng hồ để làm lab. Thì tuần này mình sẽ yêu cầu có nhiều máy nhiều hơn ở trên cloud để cho mọi người đều có nhiều thời giờ để làm. Thì 2 tuần này mình không học, thành thử học viên có thể là dùng cái thời giờ lab để mà làm cho dự án của mình. Okay. All right. Cảm ơn mọi người.
Okay, thank you. Okay, guys, so let's come back to the class. Có ai có câu hỏi gì không? Let's see. Okay, let me setting up my slide again. Just give me a second here. So I do see some question here. Okay. Normally, what lower matter signal net used for routing? Oh, okay. So let's see. I think he's asking what lower layer matter signal net used for routing. Yeah, I mean, so in CTS, right? So remember, Bat was talking about if you look at the CTS, usually we come up with this what I call a non-default rule. And if you look at the clock tree, just like a tree, right? You have the trunk. and you have the leaps, right? So and then NDR, usually you define the trunk to be higher layer, right? Let's say, 5 or 6, right? And then you go down to 3 and 4. So for signal route, very much you use all of those layers as well, right? And except for usually the AP layer, right? The top two most layer, those are usually reserved for the power distribution. So, and all of the layers will be used for routing, right? And so the tool gonna know, which layer is best, right? So
One thing to add to that is usually the standard cells, right? It uses metal 1, and some standard cells use both metal 1 and metal 2. So typically those layers, if they're used in the standard cells, then they're not, you can turn them on, but they're not very useful.
yeah, some people, because some people limit, right? Just say, well, what's the point of using M1, right? So they just block it out completely. So, but it's,
But not me,
it's,
not me. I
yeah,
turn them
I
on,
mean,
right?
yeah, I use M1 too, because, sometimes cell placed in a cluster, right? And things, some of that are shared within the cluster. So if cell placed one next to the other, and they can just use a piece of M1, connect those two pins, that's actually pretty good instead of blocking. If you're blocking M1, then it has to go to M2 and then via down, right? Um, so it's kind of like the low hanging fruit, right? Why not use it if it's there, right? So okay, so let me go back here. So Phil, I think you mentioned about so I did not prepare for that, but I think I try. So
You could delay it until you do detailed routes, but at some point we need to give the
right.
student a strategy,
So
right? When you turn on crosstalk, when you fix hold, when you fix DRV. So there's a strategy in terms of using, it's only 2 commands, right? But strategy on how you go about fixing everything and not fixing everything, and do in sequence so that you can close timing easily. So people like you and but with all the practical knowledge, I think it's useful to share with them the strategy, right? The flow.
oh, I see. In
Yeah.
terms of timing closure, right? Okay.
Exactly, right. Timing close is
Okay.
the most challenging, and what do you do if you worry about power, right? Even though it's really a basic class, but they need to know the fundamentals, the basic flow, and because they're gonna rely on that to do the final project, right? We're gonna give them some challenging speed requirement, and they need to do multiple iterations and with different strategy to close timing, etc. Right? So it's good to have that knowledge.
Right. So for me, usually I wait until detail route, and we do the timing optimization, or post route optimization after detail route, right? So
Yeah, but the tool does look at timing during global route as well. But I think the best would be on the detail route. Right. So
Right.
yeah, you can delay until then.
And I think, yeah, you were talking about, so during the break, I kind of like look at, I think, so we look at, let's see, so we mentioned that by default, during global
Hey,
route,
sir. I think you forgot to share the screen.
oh, okay, I forgot. Hold on, sorry about that. That's a good one. Okay, I thought I did. Okay, hold on. Okay, you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so we talk about, actually, let me move my slide to here. So we did talk about the importance of, having the minimum street, right? Essentially minimize the wire length. But when you run the timing ribbon, the minimum wire length may be not the correct, the optimum, net for all the critical path, right? So one way, say, is that instead of having, let me turn this on. Yeah, instead of like looking at the whole net and then try to minimize it, right? So it's a trade-off between the wire length and the timing, right? So say, well, so instead of that, they have some cost function, right? So everything has to be a cost function. So one way you can think of this, right? So previously, it just connect all these pin together, right? But consider this is your source, right? And then if the net 5 is your critical net, then, right, it's kind of like you split them out, you make them independent, right? So the net no longer has the minimum wide length, but net 5 is kind of like, you can optimize it, right? So what they try to do here is, right, so look at it one way. So multiple way is associated with the cost function. So they look at the net topology and selecting which one is good for wireline, which one is good for the critical timing path, right? So those are the things, right? That's why they say, you come in to do a quick route, and then if timing driven routing, then they look at the whole set of the critical net, right? And say, well, is there I need to reroute some of these, right? So change the topology of these net to make it better, right? So the wire length no longer the number one priority for those net, right? So the delay is a priority. So it's just a different cost, right? So, and same thing with the crosstalk as well, right? So previously you say, well, I want the minimal, minimum tree. So, but then it happened that many net actually running along, right? So causing crosstalk. So now say, well, if I'm in a critical net, I don't want I can reroute it, the net can be longer, but the crosstalk effect is much less, right? So any question? Okay, so let's continue. So we was looking at this, right? So congestion. So now what you do with congestion, right? Because that's the thing with routing, is that we at the last state, right? So there's not a whole lot you can do, right? So what you can do is you analyze congestion, and hopefully you understand is first is the problem is that the congestion is global, right? If the congestion is global, that means you're in trouble, right? So essentially it's everywhere. Either your die is too small, your cell density is too high, right? It's everywhere. Essentially, you have to go back, right? Either increase the die size or lower your performance, right? So so initially, let's say you create the dies with a certain performance in mind, but then later on say, well, let's try to squeeze it, right? Make it faster. And when you do that, increase get count, increase area, right? Density go up, and to a certain point, its routeability is not possible, right? So so those three things kind of like go together, right? So performance, power, and area, right? So you want to look at three at the same time. There's no way you can try to push one so hard, it's going to affect the other one. So but hopefully you did a good job during placement and CTS before you come to routing, right? So because if the problem is so bad, you should have seen it during CTS, right? So it's very unlikely that you're gonna say you have perfect congestion after CTS, and all of a sudden you come into routing, and the congestion is so bad, right? So usually congestion is okay, but timing is bad. Then it's kind of like it's okay. But if the congestion during CTS is really, really good, and then you come to routing and then congestion is really bad, usually that's not the case, right? So so if the congestion was pretty good after CTS, and then you come into routing, you have some congestion, and usually that's locally, right? So, and then hopefully we can look at that and try to understand what's wrong, right? Did we miss something? Miss some routing blockages? Could we, do the placement blockages? We can do cell padding, those other things, right? So that you don't have to go back all the way and calculate, increase the die size, right? That's the last thing you want to do, right? So you want to go back and say with the reasonable density, somehow you want to ship or even out the congestion, right? So if you look at the cell placement, the cluster of the cell placement, it's kind of like get pulled together, right? One is like locally it's so high, and then you try to understand is something wrong, right? Is that that's cluster of logic? Is that over constraint somehow? Did we miss some of the set full pad, right? So everywhere on the chip is kind of like empty, but then you notice that a corner of the chip, all the cell can clump together, right? That's just not right. So those are the things that you want to look at and see, is that expected, right? So ideally you want the cell to group together, calculate by function, right? So if you have a certain memory over that corner, whatever logic that talks to that memory should get pulled close to that, right? But if you don't have the placement of those macro, in the right grouping, then potentially a certain group of standard cell, maybe right in the middle, right, get pulled by different set of macro that can cause trouble as well, right? It's just very much create additional white routing for you, right? So right, so the sometimes hopefully the routing congestion is something local, right? That you can say, well, I have some huge macro that the tool just doesn't know, right? I put that macro against the edge of the block, and the tool just try to squeeze some of the route, right? Sometimes it's just like 10 or 20 route try to go through a channel, and then it couldn't get out, right? So hopefully it's just local to that channel. Then say, oh, you come in, you add let's say the routing blockages. You can block it all the way, or you can do a partial, right? That's the routing blockages. You can do both ways, kind of similar to placement blockages. You can do percentage, right? So and another one is sometimes you have a channel, right? So usually channel is just one direction, right? And as we know, the way that the layers has the preferred direction, right? So usually it's like they cross, right? One and two, 1 and 3, and 2 and 4. So if we know that within certain channel, we use up all of the vertical, and then the horizontal we're not using it. So we can actually change that layer right over that channel to be vertical instead of the horizontal, right? So essentially say, well, I want to use, this M4, by the prefer M4, let's say go horizontal, but because of I have the vertical channel, right? I can change that M4 to be vertical, right? So essentially you use M3 and M4, whatever the direction it is, that prefer to be non-refer, right? So, and the other one, I think Bart already went through. So we can, if cells that lump together, we can do cell padding, right? Or cell density, we can add. So the two ways you can control it, right? So you can add globally, say just give the whole area a certain percentage, right? Not to go over a certain percentage, like 50%. Or if the issue is routing with the pin count happen to be on a certain specific cell, then you can say, well, I need to target these cells, right? The complex cell with the high pin count density, and I'm gonna, add some space around that. So you can do with the cell padding for those calculate target, cell spacing. So, and of course, if you didn't do the turn on the congestion aware placement, maybe it's time to do that, right? So Okay, so I think I would just go.
Hey, can I say something additionally to your last slide?
Okay, let's see.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the question to the students, is it possible you still have congestion even though your overall congestion can be very low, say 50%, but you still have congestion, right? Tim touched on that, but I want to make sure that the point being understood, very well, because it's really is all about the timing closure. So we gave you an example of a DSP earlier, right? Say DSP have like a multiply and accumulate, where your data come from the RAMs, 2 X and Y, and then you have a coefficient RAM. And then you have the multiply accumulate logic in between. So say you have an overall utilization of 50%, overall. But to meet timing, the tool really need to place cells, really close to these coefficient RAM and the 2 RAMs. It has to be clumped to here to meet timing, because if the cells are here, the RC delays will kill the timing. So it is the tool's forced to just clunk all the cells in here. And why over out here you can have as low as 10%, but it doesn't matter, because to meet timing, you have to have local congestion here. So I just want to make sure you understand the importance of floor planning and being able to close timing early on during the placement process. During the placement process, your CTS is estimated, right? RC is estimated, the clock trees, skews and latency are estimated. After CTS, you have clock trees, clarity, but you're still estimating RCs with global routing. And then early on, you have global routing. Congestion analysis is still global routing, meaning track assignments and everything. It's not actual route. So at each step, you need to be, if you're not accurate, then you have to be conservative, meaning that during the time that you're estimating the RC, the resulting RC has to be worse than your final RC. Otherwise, you have trouble closing timing at the end. So it's a very important concept to understand. Yeah. That's all.
Thank you, Phil. Right, so I think we did talk about right. So the congestion and timing, right? So usually the congestion get worse when we try to do timing driven routing, right, or even placement, right? Because they tend to pull cell closer together, right? That's how you reduce the wire and the delay for the critical net, right? So another thing about the SDA or timing is that usually you look at if you look at the design and you look at all the timing pad. So usually the critical timing pad, it's just a minor, it's a minute portion of the timing space. Right? Usually most of the timing pad can meet timing with no issue, but that's just a few, right? Just a few right at the edge. That is very difficult to meet timing, right? So we look at I think Matt already mentioned there's two number that it's kind of like go hands in hands, right? You look at the worst timing slack or negative slack, and you look at the WNS, right? That's the worst negative slack, and you look at the TNS, which is the total, right? So if you have a few very, very bad negative slack, it's that harder to close timing, or you have a lot, right? The total negative slack is so large, even though the worst negative slack is not that much, right? So usually the number of the negative slack, that's actually it's much harder when you have so many pad that failing, right? So usually it's spread all over. If you just have a few, so even though the slack is worse, the tool can actually focus on that and prioritize them and make them actually close timing on those, right? So okay, so let's see next here. So I think this kind of like I very much reiterate why we need to do these. So the reason we employ or we add routing blockages is we understand where the signal should or should not go, right? So if you look at a certain area and say, no, if the router going to come in here through this channel, it's not going to be able to get out. So we're going to add the routing blockers, limit the number of routing resource for the channel, right? So so the idea is, yes, you helping the tool to ship the routing somewhere else, right? To kind of even out the congestion, right? So, and it's good for SI, right? And sometimes usually it doesn't happen a lot, but we have some macro that it just like have, it's what I call physical only macro, that when it has nothing to do with timing, it has nothing to do with logically, but it's something to do with the manufacturer, right? So say they're gonna come in and place that macro on top of the routing area. Then we have to go in, block it out, right? So and then later on we can go in and place that as macro. So it's just like a placeholder. So those are the things that you can do, right? You reserve the space for future cell, or early on, when you don't have everything, right? Some macro is there, but the abstract is kind of missing, but certain layer gonna be used, right? So you can go in, put blockers there, right, to preserve the space for later on. You don't want to, in early stage of the design, you say, well, I'm not blocking anything, and then the router has plenty of routing resource, and you route with no issue, right? But later on, when the design is more mature, more macro coming in with more metal in it, and then you start seeing the congestion, right? So you don't want to do that, right? You want to err on the kind of the wrong side. So you want to overestimate the resource that the macro going to be using, right? So you want to try to be, as precise as possible, estimating what those macro are going to be using later on. So. And so this one, yeah, I was talking about this. So we do this. We do this a lot when we have so many macro placing in groups, right? And we know the routing need to go through these channels to connect to the macro, right? So the vertical channel and the horizontal channel, they're not the same, right? So sometimes we have to tell the tool, hey, don't route it this way. I'm gonna route it the other way. Use the non-default. So the tool gonna be able to reuse that for our advantage, right? So very much we double the number of resource either for horizontal or vertical channel, right? Because the other direction we don't need it anyway, right? Because in channel you go straight, up and down, or you go left and right, right? So I think we have a question here. Okay. How's the partial routing blockage is calculated? Okay. Yeah, I think if you think of because this is different from the placement, right? Placement is area, so it's easier to visualize. It's like it's 100%, and now if for placement 100%, then that area can be used 100% for placement. If you change that to 50%, mean that only half of that, the density wise, only 50%. But routing is different. Routing, you have to think of the number of available track, right? So if I'm going to come in and I place a routing blockage of 50%, that means whatever the routing track, the number of routing track I have right now is going to be reduced by half, right? So say I look at, so usually you can go in and you look at the channel and you can actually select all the wire go through that channel that has congestion, right? So you can actually count how many wire go through that channel and say, well, so right now it's like 200 wire, right? And then based on the channel width, you can calculate exactly how many track available for that route, right? So let's say a viable track is 250. It's like, wow, 200 out, 250, probably too much, right? So because that's overhead at the end of the channel, right? You can't just go straight, 250. So you say, well, I don't want to be 200. I want to reduce to 150, right? So if the number of routing track is 250 and you want to reduce that to 50, then that's what, like three fifth, right? So that's like 60%. So you want to go in and you add the routing blockage of 60%, right? To ensure that, yes, so the tool gonna make sure that, yes, the upper limit now is not 250 anymore. It's gonna be 150, right? So that's one way to, I think it's easy to see is that you look at the tracks, right? And then just reduce that, whatever percentage that you want to add. Does that make sense? Yeah, usually the routing issue is that usually it's fall into two type, right? Around the macros and around the critical the cluster that you really want to try to meet timing, right? So usually it's always more likely is fall always into those two buckets, right? Because majority of the standard cell area is meet timing really nicely. So the route can be rerouted with no issue, right? So, but the portion of the logic that need it's like need to be, meeting timing, they get clumped together, get pushed very close together, right? That's where the congestion, and then the congestion going to create more SI, right? So the problem is gets harder and harder, right? Because when you get squeezed together, you reduce the RC delay, but at the same time, the chance of create SI increase. So
Can someone say why? I guess I just answer. So if you look at SI is due to coupling caps. So coupling cap usually is a sidewall, the sidewall caps that is in between two wires, right? So if the two wires, the distance between these two are smaller, then what happens to this cap? This cap become bigger or smaller? Please type in. Just say, yeah, bigger, right? Thank you. So yeah, because say this is a victim and this is aggressor, right? So the coupling caps between the victim and the aggressor will affect, make will have an impact on SI, signal integrity, mean crosstalk. It's called crosstalk induced delay degradation, meaning that the delays will become more with crosstalk enabled. So when the signals are close together, then the coupling caps become bigger. So that makes signal integrity worse.
yeah, and historically, the tool is actually even the tool they claim that they very good in predicting a crosstalk, but most of them are actually not pretty good. So that's the thing, you have to give the tool some room for, so when you try to push it too hard, the tool essentially give up as well. So yeah, I mean, we in the past we tried to push it so hard, so it's always try to be right there, as the right at the edge, right? So as soon as something change in the design and you kind of like you overflow and things, say last week you very much meet timing, everything perfect, but then some minor change in the design just push it over the edge, and the timing all of a sudden gets so bad, right? Because you just push over it and the tool couldn't do it anymore, right? So that's why it's always a challenge, right? So to keep pushing until you can't do it anymore, and then the schedule come in, right? So is that you try to get the best chip out, or you want to guess the chip so say very close to the best within a reasonable amount of time, right? So
yeah, so when you reach a point, the whack-a-mole game where you hit something down, something pop up, meaning that you have only that limited resource. If you fix timing on one path, you create timing problems on the other. So you can never resolve, meaning that you don't reach what you call timing closure. Closure meaning that all the violations are fixed. But if you fix one and you create a problem on the other, that is generally the case when you don't do a good job in previous stages like placement, CTS, and global route. So
Okay, so for next week, next session, we're gonna do the lab for global route, and after that, we're gonna do the detailed route.
so Tian, you didn't share the lab
I
this
don't,
time. Yeah.
yeah, because I just, I don't want to give my excuse right now, but yeah, so
Yeah,
I don't
it's
have it
fine.
yet, so I'll try to get that out as soon as possible.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Any other question, or that's very much it? Let's see. Okay, I don't see any more questions. So that's it for me. So unless Phil or anybody else has anything to add.
Yeah, I would recommend, because you do have labs. So if you want to run something, just bring up the CTS and do 2 commands. Can you type like route underscore design and then opt underscore design? Just try it out. I'll type it out. So basically routing is done by only 2 commands, route underscore, I hope I remembered right, route underscore design, and then that's doing the route. And just to play with it, it's not global route anything, but in case you get bored and you need to play with something, then opt underscore design, just to see what the tool does. Before
Right.
Tian give you some additional command to run, but basically the route is done by 2 things. Route design, just like, hey, you go route, it's timing driven, but it's mainly focused on doing the DRC fixing, just complete the actual route with the guidance from the global route. And then after that, opt underscore design will just do timing fixes, just to play with it and see what it does. Okay, that's my recommendation.
Yeah, and yeah, that's another thing about routing step is that it's so complex, right? So the tool has to do for us, right? So your previous step, you have a lot more control, right? You define the chip boundaries. You decide where the I/O gonna go, where the macro gonna go, and then during CTS, you come up with all these recipe for the CTS. By the time you get to route, very much that's it, right? You're gonna say, wow, just route it for me, right? So only limited option that you can do, right? You say, wow, should I focus on congestion, timing, or SI, right? But even those, it's just option that you give to the tool, right? So it's different from the
right.
other step.
And
right?
you use these commands over and over again when you turn on and off different things. So Tian can show you the strategy, but yeah.
Okay.
And
So
okay.
so thank you everyone. I think we a little bit over. So thank
All
you.
right.
See you
Have a good
next week.
weekend.
All right.
Yeah. See you next
Okay.
week. Bye.
Bye bye.